Huh.
This is Barbara Street Park. It connects to a lot of other neighborhoods and homes around this side of town. I used to play here a lot when I was a kid, but, it doesn't look the same as it does anymore. It's been all renovated now. When I think back to those times, I don't think back to how the park was covered in graffiti and garbage. When we look back at our childhood memories, we tend to look back at them with a rosy tint. We tend to forget about all of the garbage and all the horrible things and focus on the positive. That same psychology applies to video games, of course. I mean, just look at how many people fondly remember Sonic Adventure 2. We're more willing to overlook the flaws of old games if we remember them being good. This concept is going to be very, very important when we get to number 1, and it's especially important here. When I played this game for footage for this video, I found myself recollecting a lot of fond memories of my youth, but it's weird, because this game only came out like a year ago, maybe a little more. This game is very, very nostalgic to me, but it still has enough trappings to make it a little modern. It takes a very special game to evoke that feeling, and Undertale is indeed a very special game. A little background first, if you haven't seen some of my other non-favorite game-related videos before. I started this project in September of last year, before I had even heard of this game. When I was formulating my list of favorite games, this slot was going to belong to Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. The original Paper Mario for Nintendo 64 was the first video game I ever completed all the way to the end. And by the time the second game came out, I was so hyped. Not only did it live up to my expectations, it surpassed them. It had a touching story, wonderful and memorable characters, a twinge of darkness that I don't think any Mario game has held since, and a sense of humor that impacted my own sense of humor so much. Even when I play it today, it still holds up. And yes, nostalgia does play a part in that. While I think Thousand Year Door holds up on its own without nostalgia, me and the game have a special attachment nonetheless. Every time the credits roll, I'm right there in my living room in 2005, finally beating the Shadow Queen after weeks and weeks of trying. It feels good even now. But then a friend told me about Undertale. It was this weird new indie game ripping up the Steam charts out of nowhere. It was only $10 and it had an ugly pixel art aesthetic. It looked like just about every other Steam Greenlight pixel art game, but it seemed pretty good, so I picked it up and let it sit in my library for a while other games like Read Only Memories or Fallout 4 took up my time. When I finally got around to it though, it changed everything. It was the closest thing to a new Paper Mario game that I could have asked for, with a heartwarming narrative that tied very well to the mechanics of the game. Its heartbreaking moments and writing outshined Thousand Year Door's. It had that hilarious, leaning on the fourth wall sense of humor that I had loved as a kid. And when I dug deeper and found the darker bits, there was no way that this game could have avoided being on this list. The day that I put Undertale over Thousand Year Door on my list was a really tough one. I didn't want to let a huge part of my own personal gaming history get thrown off by such a modern game, but the more I thought about it, the more it was kind of inevitable. Undertale tickled and played with my memories with Paper Mario. The story follows the same general pace as a Paper Mario game. The battle system is very similar since you use action commands and you actually need to dodge enemy attacks. But instead of forcing you to fight, you're given the option to spare an enemy. Sometimes it might even be easier to not fight an enemy than to fight. The game world isn't entirely child-friendly, just like in Rogueport and the Thousand Year Door. Characters smoke and drink, and many characters have a very bleak outlook on life. But unlike Paper Mario, you actually play as a kid. You go through every event as a naive child, and even though the characters do respect your intelligence, they treat you as such. The final bosses of both games caught me by surprise, shocking me and terrifying me for weeks. But here, the difference is in age. I was 10 or 11 when I first encountered the Shadow Queen. I'm 23 now. Photoshop Flowey still creeps me out. And it isn't just memories of the Thousand Year Door that Undertale plays with either. It's memories of other Paper Mario games too. Asgore's fight reminded me so much of the Count Bleck fight at the end of Super Paper Mario, but unlike Paper Mario, the fact that you actually have to fight Asgore is genuinely heartbreaking, because I'd spared every single monster up to that point, and I didn't want to fight him. Of course, Undertale was borrowing more from games like Earthbound or Mother 3 than it was from Paper Mario, but it still feels nostalgic to me. It felt like replaying an old game from my childhood, but at the same time it didn't. Does that make sense? Undertale scratched those memory centers, but I almost didn't realize it until an hour or two into the game. I mean, I did feel it, but in more of an uncanny sort of way. Part of what makes Undertale so great is that it's unassuming. It looks like any other pixel art game on Steam, and it has a very slow beginning, almost to the point of parody, in fact. It introduces a novel mercy system, but aside from that, it doesn't really feel like a particularly special game on the surface. And it's probably here that I should stop you if you ignored the spoiler warning at the front. Yes, I know there are spoiler warnings in front of all these videos, but for this game, it is especially important. This is a game you want to go through as blind as possible. So if you're still watching and you haven't 100% beaten the game, stop watching, buy it, play it, finish it, and then come back. Yes, it's important in the other videos too, but the spoiler warning for this video in particular is vital. I've done a video previously about Mario RPGs and how they use the element of surprise as an artistic tool. In that video, I argued that the element of surprise is their defining element, and part of what makes them so memorable. If I followed through and put Thousand Year Door at this spot, I would be saying the exact same thing. Undertale's jokes are absolutely hilarious, its tragic moments are heartbreaking, its scary moments are terrifying, especially when it starts digging into your system and breaking the fourth wall. None of those elements could have worked as well if it weren't for the element of surprise. You have to approach this game from a certain mindset to get the best experience. It's like Spec Ops: The Line, which worked best if you went through it like a typical Call of Duty shooter. That way, its message became that much more crystal clear. Likewise, Undertale is most effective if you play it like a typical RPG. Like, say, I don't know, Paper Mario. Even if you notice the bullet point on the Steam page saying that you don't have to kill anyone, you might end up killing a couple monsters anyway your first time through. You might even kill Toriel. Every RPG has that nagging fear that maybe you didn't grind enough for that one really tough boss. And since a beginning player doesn't have a clue about what EXP or love are, they'll probably approach problems the same way. If they're having a tough time with Undyne, as I'm sure many of you have, they might go back and level grind a bit, as players typically do. And that's where Undertale gets ya. Sansa's judgment at the end is soul-crushing, especially if you killed his brother earlier. But when it comes to storytelling in video games, it's really nothing new. Games like Metal Gear Solid 2 or the aforementioned Spec Ops did it many years before this game came out. But unlike those games, the player has a choice in the matter, and that makes all the difference. The endings of Metal Gear Solid 2 and Spec Ops are static. They're counting on you to play the game with a certain mindset. And once you beat it and get the ending, you can put the game down, think about it, and move on to something else. But because Undertale always gives you that choice between fighting and mercy, the message is made more poignant, and, as an added bonus, it encourages more playthroughs. If you go through and play Undertale like you would a typical JRPG, that gut punch is going to hit you even harder than typical, because the choice was always there, and you didn't take it. So that really is effective, but it also gets you thinking, what can I do next playthrough? Flowey even goads you on, challenging you to play again and try and get a better ending. Of course, he can remember previous playthroughs. He's manipulating you to help him get more powerful. But hey, there's a better ending in it for you. Why not give the pacifist run a try? When you stop playing Undertale like an RPG and start playing it mercifully, you start to notice how memorable every enemy is. A few of them might have been memorable before, but because you have to talk to them and work out their issues, they feel like actual characters. Battles stop being simple turn-by-turn slugfests and start getting more nuanced. Sparing these monsters takes as much strategy as fighting them does, if not more so. Playing a pacifist route becomes more than just a whole new challenge to start a new game with, like it is in Deus Ex. It's almost a whole new game. You learn more about the world and its history, about the monsters and their struggles, And you also get a lot of really funny Easter eggs and jokes as well. When you spare everyone, it turns out they have a much richer story to tell you. Fancy that! If you kill even a single monster, it locks you out of stuff like Alphys's true lab, Flowey's backstory, information regarding the other human that fell underground. Hell, I guess it locks you out from knowing there was even another human in the first place. Not to mention you missed out on one of the best final boss themes ever. And yeah, the final fight does feel cheesy, but it's super enjoyable in a Gurren Lagann kind of way. By that point, you're invested. It's a fight to rescue one of the most troubled souls of the whole game, Flowey himself. I mean, think back to how unlikable this character is almost all the time. It only makes sense that redeeming him should be the final conflict in the pacifist route. And the ending that follows is a huge emotional high. It's a wonderful reward for finding ingenious ways to befriend everybody, and it gives you the happy ending this game deserves. I had a huge smile on my face and felt all warm and fuzzy watching the credits roll, even with that little trollish jump scare halfway through. And then Flowey appears again, almost daring you to snatch that ending away. I know lots of people who followed Flowey's instructions and never touched this game again. But there's a certain breed among us gamers who don't fall for that kind of thing. Those of us who enjoy seeing absolutely everything a game has to offer. We pick these worlds apart for everything they're worth. That is the second mindset Undertale expects you to be in for its next, ultimate gut punch. I almost envy its ingenuity, its contempt for those of us who go above and beyond a game's expectations. I had watched someone else play the genocide run for this game before doing it myself. I didn't want to do it. I knew the risks. I knew what I would be doing to my game if I dedicated myself to 100% completion. I knew that I would be ripping these characters right out of their happy ending just to murder them relentlessly and see what happens. But, well, I knew I wanted to cover this game for the Favorites project and, well, the footage wasn't going to record itself, was it? I hovered over that true reset button for what felt like an eternity, but there's a terrifying line in the genocide run that calls YouTube watchers out for not doing it themselves, and that pushed me over the edge. I hit that reset button and felt like a cruel fiend up until writing this very video. There's no way a beginning player is going to get the genocide ending by accident. You have to deliberately murder everything in a given area until there are literally no monsters left, or, as many gamers call it, level grinding. I definitely had flashbacks of Final Fantasy and Pokemon playing through the genocide route. It takes ages to kill enough monsters to advance the playthrough. Remember what I said about being in a typical RPG mindset? The genocide route takes that expectation to its logical extreme. Why stop with the average RPG playstyle? Undertale goes out of its way to punish the true RPG fanatics out there. Those of us who try to reach level caps or prepare themselves for PvP. Those of us who go for 100% completion and New Game Plus. Don't get me wrong, you can technically 100% complete Undertale, but it is highly discouraged. You are put through emotional and physical hell just to get to the end, let alone special dialogue for beating it a second time. And what's your so-called reward for 100% completion? Your game is permanently ruined. You can never get the happiest ending again. This is your punishment, and it sticks with you forever. And don't think you can delete your save games either. This game is really good at syncing your saves on the Steam cloud. Gabe Newell will always remember what you did. At least the final boss music, again, is pretty sweet. Again, it hits super hard because nobody forced you to play the genocide route. You could have easily spared a monster or two along the way, and yeah, the ending would have still sucked, but at least it wouldn't have permanently ruined your game. Of course, you could always be a dirty hacker and download a genocide remover tool or something, but that doesn't erase what you did. The sheer knowledge of the genocide route still ruins the game. The emotional trauma of this route sticks with you. Because the person who permanently taints your game and buys off your soul isn't really a character. It's you. Well, it's you if you took Toby's advice and named your character after yourself anyway. This character, named after you, is the game's embodiment of all of your gamer instincts. HP, attack, defense, gold, EXP, love. Every time a number increases, that feeling, that's me. And that's something that's inside every one of us. Every time we play a game just because we're bored, because we want to mindlessly grind something or practice a level, that's this character at work within us. When we watch the news and just resign ourselves to it because it's not our problem, that's this character again. So even though the genocide route is terrifying and permanently harmful, maybe it has a hopeful lesson to teach us anyway. When we choose to empathize with the characters in the game world, we never see that character. It's only by getting frustrated and apathetically grinding through the game that you meet this character. But by doing the right thing, we keep that character at bay. We demonstrate to the world that we're not just going to sit around and do what the game expects us to do. Undertale inspires us to think differently about the world around us. It makes our friendships richer by using its mechanics to help us empathize with others. It's okay not to be tough, just as long as you're there for people. Laugh at their jokes, be with them when times are tough, and just generally don't be a jerk. When was the last time a video game showed you that? Hell, when was the last time a book or a movie showed you that? This game uses its core mechanics to show us what makes humanity beautiful. It shows us at our best, but even when it shows us at our worst, it shows us how we can improve ourselves. I don't know about you, but I'd like to see more games like that coming out in the future. Well guys, there's just one more game. It's right down that trail. I'll see you there.